Hello, welcome to Man in the High Castle Season 3 review. In this installment, we will review Episode 6, History Ends. The question we are going to ask ourselves today is, when tradition is pitted against iconoclasts, who wins? Will the statues and institutions of our past stand or fall? The director of Episode 6 was Mira Menon. She has also worked on Fear the Walking Dead and the new series, The Titans. The writers, two writers on this episode. First one, Elizabeth Benjamin, and she's worked on 13 Reasons Why and The Blacklist. And then the second writer, who's also a producer on the series, Kalen Egan, and he's also worked on the Amazon Prime series, PKD Electric Dreams, Philip K. Dick Electric Dreams. He got his start working for a producer who worked on the Philip K. Dick properties, Elmore Leonard, and the writer of the BFD and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The name escapes me now, I'll remember later. In any event, he also wrote the episode. The composite score on IMDb was 8.3 for this episode. And then the plot description, courtesy of Amazon, as always. With Wyatt's aid, Juliana flees San Francisco with the stolen Nazi secrets. Children can finally return home. Ed decides to stay in the neutral zone. Tagomi makes revelations to Kido that change Kido's perspective. John Smith's career takes a turn. And I went through the episode, how many scenes? I think there were about 23 scenes. I took stock of how many took place in the Japanese Pacific states, how many took place in the Great Nazi Reich, and how many took place in the neutral zone, to get an idea of where the balance of this episode is. And it appears, just looking at the numbers, that this is the most balanced between them all. Not too much time was spent in any one particular area. I think the biggest cause of that was less emphasis on John Smith and also Juliana moving from the Japanese Pacific states into the neutral zone. So that shifted a great deal of where the episode took place, since she's such an important character in the show. Just to give you the breakdown, 10 scenes in the Japanese Pacific states, 6 in the Great Nazi Reich, and 7 in the neutral zone, and then one other, like kind of hard to classify where it is. Overall, I liked the episode. There was a very nice montage at the end, and a couple good character moments. There's one that I will detail. I'll give a shot-by-shot breakdown between Ed McCarthy's character and Robert, if I remember right. No, Frank. Ed and Frank's characters. The first thing I wanted to talk about was the scenes between Juliana Crane and Wyatt Price. And I might as well drink from this rather than hold it for a minute. In this episode, Wyatt's character begins to come to the forefront. Until now, his role was diminished, and now that we've had the death of mine's not working so well today. The death of Luke Kleintank's character, Joe Blake, that's right. It appears that they are building up the character of Wyatt to give Juliana a foil to work against. And the scenes between Juliana and Wyatt we see something of the aftermath, the fallout of her killing Joe Blake's character the episode before. And because she's obviously dealing with the repercussions of that, she has some trauma, it allowed me to reflect a little bit on the issue of mental health. And there's a nice contrast now between the state that Juliana's character is in and the state that Helen's character is in. We see that Helen is also dealing with trauma, the death of Thomas, but because she's able to see a psychiatrist, she's getting through her grief. And to contrast against that, Juliana has no licensed help, no trained help. She has only the shoulder of, can't even call him a friend. At this point, his motivations are so unclear. We're not sure just what he wants from Juliana. By that I mean Wyatt. And the method she has of dealing with her trauma is self-medication. And we can see, because she has a flashback at one point to an earlier encounter with Joe, that she's not dealing that well with it. So for me, I thought it was an interesting contrast that the character who's in the least free area of the world is receiving the best mental care, that is being Helen, but the character who's gained her freedom also has the least proficient mental care. And it'll be interesting to see where both of those characters go, because Helen's care is not free. There's the implication that everything she tells her doctor could in some way come back to hurt her later, even though it's giving her temporary ease, temporary comfort. And in contrast, because Juliana has the most freedom, she has the least to worry about as she tries to deal with the death of Joe Blake, but she's also receiving the least care. Another issue I wanted to address is the idea of identity. Just what role does personal identity, how is it affected by the political system that you're involved in? And so I thought we could look at 3 characters and see how did the government and the culture they're in shape their identity, harm their identity, their search for identity, or aid it. First one, let's look at Juliana, and she's been the most consistent. Since the episode 1, where there was the disappearance and death of her sister Trudy, she has faced this great tragedy in her life, and it's prompted her to action for others. She's used her personal tragedy and used it to change the world in a way that benefits others. You see that she's risked herself. In this episode, episode 6, she risked herself to deliver secret intelligence to Tagomi. She could have tried to sell that if she were a rascal, if she were a villain. If she were to fail in the moment, she could have fled, even with the intelligence, and not given it to Tagomi. But she put her own life in jeopardy in order to help someone else. You see it in the way that she risked herself by giving Abinson's film to Joe Blake in season 1, even though it created nothing but problems for her throughout season 2 with the resistance. So in Juliana's case, where she has been raised in the Japanese Pacific states, which is somewhat repressive, and after seeing the death of her sister, fleeing to the neutral zone, her system, the system that she has been in, has aided her. It's aided her in that she is a helper. She's someone who's trying to benefit society and others. Let's look at her opposite, Joe Blake. Joe Blake was raised in the German, sorry, no, the Greater German Reich, the Great Nazi Reich. He was raised in the Great Nazi Reich, and his efforts to be a good citizen always led him to failure. By trying to be a good citizen and being engaged in espionage in season 1 for John Smith, that led to him feeling guilty because he was keeping secrets from Juliana. And when after Juliana saved his life and gave him the film, he tried to quit being a Nazi agent, and that led to him being drawn back in when his father called him back to Berlin, and him trying to be a good son to his father led to him being wrapped up in his father's intrigue within the Nazi Reich, which led to his internment and brainwashing. Everything that Joe tried, his impulses were good, but the system failed him. It beat him down, and in the end, him trying to be a good citizen and lead Juliana to the Nazi Reich, the happiness and purity and perfection of the Nazi Reich just led to his death. So for Joe, his every impulse to be a good person led, because of the system that he was in, only led to the opposite. He became someone who killed others and in the end was killed. And finally, let's look at Frank, who's also had a very interesting journey. Even though he was also a member of the Japanese Pacific States, like his girlfriend Juliana, his tragedy, the death of his sister and his niece and nephew, led, rather than to him helping others, it led to him acting against. He became a member of first he tried to sell fraudulent memorabilia to the Japanese and bilk them, and then he became engaged with the resistance and tried to kill members of the Japanese ruling class, and then at the very end of season 2 bombed the building where the bureaucrats and the soldiers were. However, in season 3, he's been moved to a different location. He's now in Sabra, and after seeing that his actions have led to the death of others and that he has blood in his hands, he has, under a new system, been able and trying to be a good person. At the very end of episode 6, we see that he's found freedom and happiness, and that his impulse now is not to act against others but act for others through his art. He's found completion through his art, and the system he's in is allowing him to be a beneficial person towards others. So you can see that one of the recurring themes within the show, people searching for their identities. You also see it in McCarthy, and you see it in what's-her-head, the Nazi, the woman who was romancing Joe Blake in season 2. I'll get her name in 1 second. Her name is... Oh, okay, we'll just have to let it go. It'll take me too long to find it. Not Thelma. Yeah, I can't find it. But in any event, you see it in many of the characters, this quest for identity, and that the institutions they're in some ways, either help them or hinder them. Having discussed that now, I want to go over the scene I mentioned earlier, the scene of Frank and Edward and Mark, and talk about the way that the cinematography in that scene and the acting in that scene work together to enhance the acting ability of the actors and bring out the meaning of the scene. Listed as scene 22 in the notes for the episode from Amazon, this episode was directed by Gonzalo Amat, who is also a director in the TV series Happy and Person of Interest. In this scene, Frank Frick, played by Rupert Evans, Edward McCarthy, played by DJ Quallis, and Mark Sampson, played by Michael Gaston. I want to do a special note here of Michael Gaston's performance. I've enjoyed it from his first appearance in the show in season 1. I feel like he gives a really natural performance, and it serves as a good foil opposite Rupert Evans in his performance of Frank Frick. Now, getting to the sequence, looking at this first still, we see that Frank Frick, it's first I want to talk about the depth of field. It's a very wide depth of field, and I think that the cinematographer, I should say it's a very shallow depth of field. We can only see the front. We can only see Rupert Evans in the front. And throughout the shot, there are about 3 different planes that the cinematographer has to navigate. And in this first one, we have Frank in the left and in focus, and coming up behind him is Mark Sampson. Next shot. The focus changes, and we see Mark Sampson now telling Frank that he's run into Ed McCarthy, and this scene, this is the crux of the episode of the scene. Frank has a conflict for the guilt that he feels for the way that he has treated Ed McCarthy in the past. He's not ready to confront who he was, and this is the beginning of him coming to terms that he is a person who has hurt others. He has committed sin within the view of his religion, and without religion, he is beyond redemption, at least within the view of the religion that he is a member of. And here is, again, I was talking about the 3 different planes. Right now, Frank is in that middle plane, and the cinematographer has to track him to the right of the shot, and then follow him up to the front where he comes to the front plane. And in the meantime, I can't remember if Michael Gaston, the actor, has moved. I don't think he has. I think he's still on that back plane. But you can see in this shot the tension that Rupert Evans is carrying in the character, the way that he's looking off to the side. Okay, and here we get the first glimpse of DJ Quallis. We get the first glimpse of his character, Edward McCarthy, and it's a nice 3-point shot, and you see all the 3 characters in the 3 different planes, and the back planes are the ones that are captured here. Rupert Evans is blurry, he's out of focus. And now Michael Gaston leaves the scene, and we have just DJ Quallis and Rupert Evans, and you can see that there is a tension between them. And in this next shot, we're given the full glimpse of Rupert Evans and what will be the beginning, I think, of the redemption of his character, because he has to confront the sins, the hurt that he has inflicted on other characters, other people through the series. And DJ Quallis is going to be the vehicle for his coming to terms with that. And here, I wanted to point it out, the longer takes throughout all this camera work and carrying that the field, the 3 planes, mainly this serves the actors. It allows the actors to get in the scene. Something I've said again and again about how longer takes really allow the actors to feel the rhythm of the scene, to develop within themselves the emotion of the scene. And you can see here these 2 actors playing opposite each other, playing against each other. And then as DJ Quallis comes up, he's able to fully commit to the scene. And I'm not sure if he really cried or if they were digitally added, but there are tears that appear on the shoulder of Rupert Evans at the end of the scene. And I think that is just a remarkable combination of cinematography, writing, and performance. And I wanted to point that out. Finally, I want to go over the very last sequence of the episode, the one where Frank gets his bar mitzvah in the neutral zone, and Joe Smith rises to the role of Reich Minister of the Great Nazi Reich. And the two sequences are intercut so that we are, as viewers, contrasting the two. And for me, it raised the question of between the three areas that we have seen, the three major areas, the Great Nazi Reich, Japanese Pacific States, and the neutral zone, what effect has these political systems had on its citizens? And although the effect on the citizens between the Japanese Pacific States and the Great Nazi Reich is very similar, there are differences. So let's go over the three. The Great Nazi Reich, it's a spy state. The citizens spy on each other, even within their own families. Leadership has violent purges. We see that with the death of Hitler, that Himmler's machinations and other generals became a bloody purge. The weak and different are persecuted, executed. Political dissent is eliminated, not tolerated at all. And American culture is eradicated, especially in season 3, the Ya Null, year 0. All the icons will be taken down and destroyed. In the Japanese Pacific States, there are slight differences. The leadership changes less. I think it also helps that the writers haven't had a power vacuum within the Japanese Pacific States. They almost had it happen within season 1 with the assassination attempt of the Japanese prince. But without that power vacuum, the normal jockeying that goes on has been less violent. The weak and the different are eliminated, but if they are kept out of sight, they're tolerated. There's a Japanese phrase, if a nail sticks out, the hammer pounds it in. So that the Japanese do have a bias against anything weird, strange, and different, even today. And it would have been more pronounced within the time, within the epoch of World War II. However, we do see that the Japanese seem to have more of a laissez-faire. If you can keep it out of sight, then no face is lost. So we don't care so much. We being the Japanese power. Friends and family do spy on each other. And let's recall the very first episode where the person in the judo class rats out Juliana when she's given the film by her sister Trudy. To contrast the Germans, who are trying to destroy all American culture and history, in the Japanese Pacific States, American culture is fetishized. And that's a way that Frank and Robert Tilden have kind of tried to hustle on the side of manufacturing fake goods, fake mementos of American culture. And we do see that dissent is eliminated, but beginning with this season, they are trying to take a softer touch in comparison to the hard touch that the Germans have. Now, the wide extreme of all of those is the neutral zone. Within the neutral zone, leadership is ad hoc. It's more of an anarchy. So you maybe have pockets of resistance, and then pockets of no lawlessness, where just gangs are the dominant law or the dominant power, and you have extrajudicial punishment, agents for both the Japanese and the Germans wandering through and trying to either kill or kidnap and extradite back to their nations. The weak and different are tolerated, and we see African American culture and homosexual culture flourishing. The music is present within the scenes, and dating someone of your own gender is tolerated. The community in general is tenuous, and it's capable of being coerced, but it's also capable of protection, of circling the wagons. So we see that scene when Sabra votes to either keep Frank or to eject him, and they vote to keep him. And because Frank has created those posters, the Rising Sun posters, and Ed talks about how he's seen them all around Denver, and the reports are that people have seen them all the way down to Baja, Mexico. Dissent is flourishing within the neutral zone. Within those three different political systems, two of them being authoritarian or fascist, one being anarchic. We can see the effect it has on the characters to both beneficial and detrimental ends, and the effect that it has on the weak and the different. I don't have anything for in case you missed it for this episode, so I'll conclude here. I hope that right now life finds you well, and that you will join me again soon. That is all for now. Take care and be well. The question for today is, when tradition is pitted against iconoclasm, iconoclasts,